Money did not fix my life, but it gave me buying power. I needed options before I needed peace. If right now you are trapped financially inside of a narcissistic, abusive relationship, you will understand this, and I'm going to help you see the other side. It's your brain running the same calculation all day long while you do normal life. You make coffee, you load the dishwasher, you answer a text, you change a diaper, and there's a second track playing underneath everything. What's in the account? What's coming out? What's going to get brought up? What's going to start a fight? What can't I buy? What can't I say? Financial control doesn't just stress you out, it rewires your baseline. Your body lives like it's being watched. Your brain anticipates consequences. Your nervous system lives in the future because the present is not stable. This episode is blood and bone, what financial autonomy did to my nervous system while my reality was shrinking and I could feel it. Buying power changes what your body tolerates because you stop living like there's no escape route. I'm Megan Webster, an abuse recovery coach, a trauma-informed strategist, and the woman a narcissist hopes to never meet twice. This is the Narcissist Worst Nightmare podcast, and I know that you don't want soft advice. You want something that's actually going to change your reality. I'm not going to sell you a fantasy that money makes everything okay. It does not repair character, create empathy, or turn a narcissist into a decent human being. Money changes the one thing that means everything for you, which is access. Access is the difference between thinking about leaving and being able to leave. I want to share parts of my life where I felt that shift in my body, the weeks where my mind was trapped in the numbers, the moments where humiliation was used like a tool, the night at my kitchen table where I made a decision with shaking hands, the season where I said yes to work I should have priced higher, but I needed traction, not ego, and the quiet autonomy moments that look small from the outside but feel massive in your body when your life is being controlled by a narcissist. Before I had money felt out of reach in my body. And this might sound familiar to you. When you wake up, your first thought isn't to make breakfast, it's the account. You tell yourself you'll check it later, but your hand's already on your phone, in the banking app. You see the number, and your body responds before your brain does. That low level of dread that makes you want to clean something, organize something, to feel like you have control. You put the phone down and you try to act normal. Then you remember you need one thing, a basic thing, and you feel sick to your stomach because you can already feel the consequence of asking or talking about it. You and I both know it's not just the fear of no. It comes with the commentary, the sigh, the lecture, the mood shift, and feeling like you're being audited for something very normal. So you negotiate with yourself. I can wait. Maybe I can make it work. Maybe we don't need it. And the sick part is that you start doing that so often that you forget what your actual needs are. Your baseline becomes self-abandonment and denial. I used to call it anxiety. It wasn't necessarily my nerves, but it was my body trying to keep me safe in a house where money was used to control the temperature of the room. And when the temperature of the room decides whether your day is peaceful or punishing, your nervous system becomes a strategist. You try to predict what will set him off, what will get used against you, and what the cost is of being a person that has a need. Financial control feels like a different level of captivity, not because of the money, but because your body learns that reaching for anything bigger triggers punishment. Before I had stable money, safety felt out of reach. And it wasn't because I didn't work, it's because I was on a path that had consequences. I was a career bartender in Ontario, quick money that never stayed, and I struggled with income not because I wasn't a good bartender, but because I was alcoholic. Cash would come in and out. It was not stable. My bills were always paid and I looked okay on the outside, but I wasn't building anything and I was trying to get through things in my own head. By the time I got sober, it was COVID. Work was impossible. The world was shut down. There was no pivot, no simple just get a new job. The money that I had in savings was all that I had left. So by the time I moved to New Brunswick, which was still in 2020, I wasn't working. Shortly after, I became pregnant and I was on EI. It was $600 a month and my share of rent and expenses was also $600 a month. When your income is fixed and small and tied to systems, you don't get to decide that tomorrow is going to be different. It feels like a locked box. One unexpected bill feels like a threat to your whole life, and your nervous system reads it all as danger. When money is tight and the relationship is unsafe, the stress isn't just numbers, it's silent. You cannot talk about these things without punishment. You can't ask for clarity around bills without it being framed as disrespect. You can't say, I'm scared, without being told you're overreacting. So you do the math by yourself all day long. That constant checking made me feel like a crazy person. Not anxious, but crazy. I would check my bank account and then check it again like the number was going to change. I would scroll Marketplace, then Amazon, and stare at flyers like I could outsmart the month by finding the right deal. I wanted to vomit, and it felt super isolating because I was not allowed to talk about it. When you are under financial pressure, things like sleep and food just end up being weird. Even if there's nothing inherently wrong in that moment, it's a constant loop in the back of your brain. And when you've lived that long enough, you realize you're just waiting for the shoe to drop, and you believe it's part of just who you are. With my ex-husband, money was not up for discussion. It was a hierarchy. One week things would seem fine, the next week it was a problem. I never saw a single bill or rent. It always kept me unsure and second guessing, in the position of trying to prove if I'm being reasonable or not. And you feel exhausted living that kind of way because you can't solve anything. You can't budget your way into peace. You can't communicate into stability because stability would require him to stop benefiting from your dependence. So you start living like the goal is not security. You just want to avoid the storm. The person whose nervous system treats calm as temporary. This is one of the major reasons why women stop talking about it. They get quiet because your body learned the cost of speaking. What's mine was ours and what's his was his, and that's really the simplest way to say it. It looked fairly normal on paper. Shared bills, split responsibilities, adult partnership. Inside, it was control. There was always a moving target. The rules changed depending on what he wanted, and the math didn't matter. It was just a point of pressure. So it's never again about what you do or don't want. You need to start thinking steps ahead. If I buy this, will it be noticed? If I ask this, will it be framed as an attack? If I need this, will it become a lecture? And that is the cost. It's not just money. It's the fact that your brain is working overtime trying to understand this and defend yourself. There were a lot of public moments with my narcissist ex-husband that were not accidents. I remember being in Toys R Us, pregnant, and he decided that we needed 6 baby gates. 6. Over $100 each. We had 1 staircase. I did not snap. I didn't raise my voice. I said, hey, we have 1 staircase. Why do we need 6? He ended up yelling in the store. He stormed out. He dropped all the boxes on the floor like it was this huge problem. I was so red and so embarrassed. And I was standing there and a woman came up to me and she said that I didn't deserve that. She helped me pick up the boxes and put them back on the shelf. And before she walked away, she said, leaving is possible even if it doesn't feel like it. As I walked away, I kept thinking like, this cannot be my life. When other people start to notice it, you try to pretend like it's normal even though you know it's not. You're trying to protect something in the relationship, but when strangers see it, you can't pretend it's normal. When a woman you've never met clocks it within 10 seconds, you can't keep telling yourself that this is okay. It is a signal for you that you need to get out. We also had a baby moon where I was told I had to pay for the Airbnb. During our time away, he sat me down and told me $600 a month was not enough for our bills. I'd never seen the bills other than our rent. The point was to make me feel like I was failing, like I was a burden, and like I should do something about it. He then blamed it on the hydro bill for the baths that I was taking. I had sciatica. My body was on fire. The bath was the only relief that I had, and he turned my pain relief into a massive form of guilt. He tried to make my body an inconvenience and my comfort something that I had to earn. This is what financial abuse looks like when it's done by someone who knows exactly how to make you feel small without leaving a bruise. It wasn't a budget conversation. It was a control conversation. In the last episode, I shared with you how I started a virtual assistant business, but there's a little section that happened before that I do need to share with you. I had a catering business when I was in Ontario for about 6 years, and I decided that I was going to relaunch it in New Brunswick. I could stay home with Hunter, I could have people pick up things from the house, and I ended up getting a couple of military contracts. Now, I was on EI, and I knew well enough not to mess with government money and taxes at the same time. So there was one night I was sitting at the kitchen table, and this wasn't just a financial decision for me. It was a moment that I realized I could not keep living inside of this monitored reality. And it wasn't about dreaming about this great future together. I was just trying to get out of where I was. I was very much in a scarcity mode, and my brain was in this like threat detector. When you're a mom, that gets a lot sharper because it wasn't just my safety that I was tracking. I was watching what escalates, what happens when I'm too independent, too quickly. And I just kept thinking that my son deserves a free life and a loving home. It's a night that I will never forget. I was staring at 2 contracts that I had for my catering business worth almost $6,000. And in my head, I thought, that's it. We're safe. I've made it. I can finally breathe. But then the fear hit. And it wasn't because of the work, but because of what I was doing next, which was cutting off my maternity leave. I was much more terrified of the government and taxes. And I know that sounds wild, but as someone whose whole life was held together by numbers, I couldn't really afford to lose anything. I remember looking at the government website and hovering over the button And this wasn't pretend anymore. This was a moment that I couldn't go back to. It wasn't going to be something that I could figure out later. It was a decision that was going to force me to continue and respond. I didn't feel empowered that night. I honestly felt quite sick. And the next morning, when I shared about the contracts with my husband, it got shut down. Not because I failed, but because he made that happen. It wasn't a business failure. It was control. It was another door that was closed while my nervous system was already trying to scramble for a way out. He could not fathom me doing something as an individual, and he manipulated me into feeling badly that I wouldn't be a present mom and hold the catering contracts at the same time. And I unfortunately believed him, but he did not know that I cut off my yeah. When you choose to buy something for yourself in a controlled environment, it doesn't feel like shopping, it feels like betrayal. And that sounds very extreme until you've lived it. But the house had rules that were never written down. I was not allowed to make moves or choices without him. I wasn't allowed to build a future that didn't include his control over it. So when you do, your nervous system reacts like you're about to go to jail. Buying that virtual assistant course wasn't just a course. At first, it was a secret. It was a plan. It was me trying to do something without asking for permission. And my body kept giving me warning signs. When I went to go put the course on my credit card, I could barely type the numbers in. Not because I didn't know what I was doing. I understood exactly what it meant. It was a move, but in a house like that, that was not something that would have been okay. I had this looping thought that I was going to fail, I was going to make things worse and just prove him right, but I purchased it anyways. It felt like I crossed a line that I could not uncross. Taking things back was part of how I survived for years, even if it was minuscule. It became very important to my rebuilding process. Previously, if a conversation got tense, I made myself smaller. If I wanted something that might trigger him, I would talk myself out of it first. Buying the course was not me doing that. I actually didn't tell anybody. He couldn't know because if he did, it would have turned into punishment and then he would have sabotaged me and made it look like coincidence. I did not have any more room for anyone else's uncertainty or to have them project their fear into my plan, so I moved alone. The next few days felt ugly. I'd open my laptop and my heart would start racing. I'd watch a video and my brain would go foggy. Fear makes you clumsy. It makes you second guess basic steps and almost convinces you that quitting feels safer than trying. I did keep going, and it was not because I was fearless. It was because I knew if I kept staying, my life was going to continue dying. The season that came next was my yes season. And when you have a season of yes, you don't necessarily need it for anything other than proof. You want something to land in your nervous system so it stops telling you that you're trapped. But the season was not about me having low standards. It was about me having traction in a situation that I didn't have room for pride. Women who have not lived in active abuse will judge you for it. They will tell you things like value yourself, charge your worth. Then you'll be confident. You don't understand you're building a bridge when you're standing in a fire. So I said yes to clients and things that I would not say yes to now, because back then I just needed to create a door. I needed the exit to become real. I needed buying power in my hands, not a quote on fucking Instagram. When the first clients came in, I was undercharging $20, $30 an hour, and a lot of people still tried to push that down. I just needed money to land and proof that my effort was not out of panic. That version of me wasn't trying to build a brand or some big business. It was all about buying power. I saw money come in that I'd never seen in any account in my entire life. And that first month, when I saw it add all up on paper, it was $3,400. I couldn't sit there and celebrate. It was almost not real. And the point for me was not the number. The point is what it did to my body. My nervous system told my brain, logically, we can now move. We can create options. Here's the shift that I really want you to know about. When money started coming in, I stopped narrating every single purchase in my head. I stopped rehearsing the arguments that hadn't happened yet. I stopped waiting, checking. I stopped acting like a grown woman asking for permission to live. It didn't make me soft. It made me steady, and there's a big difference. Soft is hoping the environment you are in becomes safe. Steady is knowing you can handle what happens if it doesn't. It's waking up and knowing you can call a cab or pay for a bill urgently. It knows you can choose the next step and execute it instead of waiting for permission. It's your nervous system actually understanding and not begging. The first thing that I noticed was the noise in my head. I didn't stop thinking about money overnight, but it did become somewhat relaxed. I would get to midday and notice I hadn't opened the banking app. The 3 and 4 a.m. wake-ups no longer happened. It wasn't feeling cornered with no exit. It was the pressure of building something and not wanting to drop the ball. It was a very different nervous system experience. It was more excitement. My hunger came back online and food felt more normal. I stopped getting that sick feeling in my stomach every time I bought a basic need. And the house was a little bit more quiet because I stopped having these conversations. I started buying small things without permission: a coffee, a toy for Hunter, a shirt. Those purchases weren't necessarily about the item. They were proof that I could decide and not pay for it emotionally afterwards. And it wasn't necessarily just the purchases. It was the posture in my body. It's the way that I stood in my own house. Even if I had to leave that day, my nervous system had new information that I could. Autonomy starts small and it starts quiet. The first thing that I ever bought was a touch light for the office downstairs. Buying the light looked normal. It looked like me choosing an environment without permission, a decision without a fight. It wasn't a massive move, but it was something that I could feel, and the sky didn't fall out because of the result of it. I started making decisions like blocking him on social media and my business accounts, and I expected a fight. But he never asked, not even once, and that told me a lot. It wasn't about connection. It was about access to him that benefited him. When my access to myself started growing, he didn't take it seriously enough to clock what I was actually doing. The next summer, we took a trip to Ontario, and it still makes me sick to my stomach to think about because it was actually the reason why my dad and I stopped talking for a while. When my husband arrived, my dad and him got into a fight on the first day. It was a massive fallout, and then the next action was a fallout between him and my dad's wife. It all came down on me like I had caused it, even though I was nowhere in the conversation. Hunter and I had flown down there, and the plan was to fly back 3 weeks later. Suddenly, we needed a place to stay, hotels. I needed to try and change the plane ticket. I was paying for my husband's gas. It wasn't a question. Everything was framed as if it was my fault, like I was responsible for fixing the aftermath of a fight that I had no participation in. I remember feeling used, small, not sad, but very small in my own body. And the thought kept coming across my head that I was a bank to him. And I was the one that paid for consequences and gets blamed for the mess, but I'm also the one that cleans it up and absorbs it. Money did not fix my marriage. I could not fix my marriage. I also didn't want to. It didn't matter if I gave more, paid more, tried more. It was never going to be safe. I bought the house. I paid off his debt twice. There were so many things I did thinking that maybe if I do this, it would be enough, and it never was. What money did was remove the delusion. It made one thing very clear. Once I had consistent income, I could see that my effort wasn't building partnership. It was feeding a dynamic. Money doesn't heal a narcissist. It fixes your ability to stop negotiating with them. I had a woman DM me recently, and she asked me what money changes inside of an abusive dynamic. And what I shared was this. It's not this outward confidence, it's capacity. Money gives you the capacity to think instead of react, to solve instead of spiral, to leave room instead of saying because you can't afford the fallout, to say no and let the silence hang without rushing to fix it. It's what allows your nervous system to stop treating every single day like a hostage situation. Because people love to tell you to leave, choose yourself, tell you to stop engaging. None of that answers the real question you're carrying. Where do you go? What do you do if he escalates? What happens the first night you're out? How do you protect your child? How do you pay for the things that become urgent the second you stop pretending? Buying power is what answers those questions. It's the ability to move, being able to handle something without permission. Buying power is the difference between crisis and emergency, because crisis is an emergency when it's no resources, without resources. So when you have that, you stop living like your only option is to tolerate the abuse. Which is why I decided to share the Get the Fuck Out game plan training. It's the bridge between you recovering from narcissistic abuse and you leaving abuse by understanding you have buying power and the ability to build a business as a virtual assistant from your home so you have a pathway out. The call is free. You can register in our show notes. And before we wrap up, I do want to say you are not wrong for wanting buying power. Autonomy changes your nervous system because options change your reality. And the first time that you have options, the ones you build, you don't necessarily cry. Sometimes you get quiet or you feel rage. Sometimes you feel like you want to throw up. For some people, it's relief. Other people, it's grief. And at the same time, you realize how long you've been living without access. You will start noticing how much of your personality was actually a coping strategy. The easygoing part, the low maintenance piece. The I don't actually need that. I can handle it. Part of that is strength. Most of it is your nervous system staying small so you don't get punished. Money doesn't give you a new identity, but it does give you enough access to stop shrinking your life. If this episode cracks something open in you good, that means you're not just listening, you are moving through it. Please share this with another woman who needs it. So you don't miss the next one, send me a DM on Instagram and tell me what landed the hardest for you. And please register for the Get the Fuck Out Game Plan training live on February 24th. The link is in the show notes.